A young Navy SEAL walks into a diner and freezes. Why? Because the quiet man in the corner has a tattoo no one's supposed to see. A tattoo connected to a mission the government never talks about. It all started on a rainy afternoon in a quiet little diner on the corner of 5th and Monroe. The kind of place that smelled like fresh coffee, old vinyl booths, and pancakes that never go off the menu. The rain was tapping against the windows in a soft rhythm, and everything inside felt like a moment suspended in time. People were scattered throughout the diner, an older couple sharing a slice of pie, a trucker flipping through a dog-eared magazine, a waitress pouring another round of coffee with a tired but warm smile. It was peaceful, normal, safe. Then the bell above the door jingled. A man stepped inside, letting in a gust of cold air and the scent of wet pavement. He looked like he didn't belong, not because of how he dressed, but because of how he moved. Sharp, controlled, like someone who had just stepped off a battlefield and hadn't fully come home yet. His name was Jake, late 20s. Broad shoulders, buzz-cut hair, and eyes that had seen too much too young. He was a Navy SEAL, just back from deployment, and this diner was supposed to be a stop on the way to nowhere. A quiet break from a loud world. Jake scanned the room with the instincts of someone who couldn't switch off, even in peacetime. He wasn't looking for trouble, just a seat and a minute to breathe. His boots were soaked, his fatigue jacket dripped onto the floor, and his face carried that weight all soldiers carry after too many months away. As he looked around, his gaze stopped at a booth near the window. An older black man sat there alone, hunched slightly forward, holding a mug of black coffee in both hands like it was his only source of warmth. He wore a worn-out plaid shirt, a green ball cap pulled low over his brow, and a quiet stillness that made him blend into the background. Jake wouldn't have looked twice, except for one thing. As Jake stepped closer to the counter, something caught his eye. The man reached across the table to adjust the sugar container, and in that simple motion, his sleeve rode up just enough to reveal the inside of his left forearm. There it was, a tattoo, but not just any tattoo. Jake stopped in his tracks, his entire body tensed, like he was back in enemy territory, sensing danger before it appeared. On the man's arm was a black serpent, coiled tightly around a vertical trident. Beneath it, a faint crimson drop bled from the tip of the weapon. Simple, clean, brutal. Jake knew that symbol. Every SEAL knew it. It was the emblem of a mission so secret, so dangerous, that only whispers of it passed between the highest-ranking operators. It was supposed to have been disbanded. Everyone involved, either dead or disappeared. Jake had only ever seen it once before, on a grainy photocopy in a locked briefing room. It belonged to Dramatized, an off-the-record Black Ops mission carried out in the early 90s. Mission with no official paperwork, no medals, no survivors. At least none that anyone talked about. And yet, here it was, right in front of him. His breath caught in his throat. The man in the booth was no regular vet, no weekend warrior. This was someone who had lived through something the world had tried to bury. Jake walked past the counter toward the booth, barely noticing the waitress asking if he wanted a coffee. His eyes were locked on that tattoo like it was calling out to him. His instincts, his training, everything in him said this wasn't coincidence. He stopped beside the table. "Sir," Jake said slowly, eyes narrowing, "where did you get that tattoo?" The older man looked up calmly, his weathered face unreadable. His eyes, sharp and calculating, met Jake's, and then he did something that made Jake's spine tighten. He smiled, just slightly, and said, "Long story, kid." The tattoo was no ordinary ink. It was a black serpent, coiled tight around a vertical trident, the serpent's tongue flicking out as if it were alive. Behind the trident, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, was a faint red smear, like a drop of blood sliding down a blade. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like some abstract military art. Maybe something from a different era. But Jake knew exactly what it was. He had seen a sketch of it once, just once, during SEAL advanced training. It wasn't part of the official materials, no PowerPoint slides, no mission files. It was shown behind closed doors by a senior instructor who only whispered the name, Dramatized. That emblem wasn't just rare. It was forbidden. Operation Shadow Tide had been the kind of mission you don't read about. No headlines, no records. Only a handful of elite operatives were ever even told about it. According to what little Jake had heard, it had happened decades ago, deep behind enemy lines, in a country the U.S. still claims it never set foot in. It was said to involve a betrayal at the highest level, extractions gone wrong, and a firefight so brutal that even the CIA stopped asking questions. The survivors? Supposedly dead. All of them. Except now Jake was standing in front of one. He felt his hands grow clammy, his chest tighten. He couldn't take his eyes off that tattoo. His training told him not to draw attention to it. Not in public, not like this. But something inside him, maybe instinct, maybe awe, pushed him forward. Jake stepped closer, clearing his throat. "Sir," he began carefully, voice low. "Where did you get that tattoo?" The older man didn't flinch. He looked up slowly, raising his coffee mug to his lips before setting it down with a soft clink. His face was lined but strong. His eyes, dark, steady, and unreadable, locked onto Jake's with a kind of quiet authority that made the younger man feel like he was back in boot camp. There was a long pause. Then, the man gave a small, almost amused smile. "Long story, kid." Those 3 words hung in the air like smoke. Jake didn't move. He couldn't. The voice, the presence, the tattoo. It was all clicking together. He wasn't just talking to an old soldier, he was face to face with a living ghost. A man whose name had likely been wiped from every system, every file, every photo. This wasn't someone who had left the battlefield. This was someone who had been erased from it. Jake knew the protocols. He knew he should walk away, pretend it didn't happen, forget what he saw. But he couldn't, not now. Not after years of hearing whispers in the barracks about a squad of men who never came home, about a mission that went beyond courage, into something darker. Jake's voice was quieter now, almost reverent. "You were shadow-tied, weren't you?" The man didn't answer right away. He just looked down at the table, then out the rain-soaked window, as if watching memories play out on the glass. Then he looked back and said, "Most people who ask that question don't really want the answer." Jake's mouth was dry. His pulse raced, but his training kept him calm on the outside. Barely. He couldn't walk away now, not after what he'd seen, and definitely not after what he was beginning to suspect. He stood there, heart thudding, in his chest, and said in a voice just loud enough to be heard over the soft hum of the diner, "I'm Jake Harris, SEAL Team 4. The older man didn't seem surprised. He just took a slow sip from his coffee mug, then placed it gently back on the saucer. For a moment, he said nothing. He looked Jake up and down, not judgmentally, but with the kind of quiet analysis only veterans know. He wasn't just looking at Jake's face. He was reading his soul. Finally, he gave a slow nod, as if the name meant something to him. "Name's Malcolm," he said, then added, almost as an afterthought, "Malcolm Briggs." Jake blinked. His breath caught in his throat. Malcolm Briggs. That name had lived in whispers, passed from bunk to bunk like a secret too dangerous to say out loud. He wasn't just a name in a file. He was a myth. A story instructors would hint at but never explain. A soldier said to be as fearless as he was deadly. The kind of operator who never missed, never spoke, never left a man behind, and never came back. "Briggs?" Jake asked, stunned. "Malcolm Briggs?" The older man gave a soft grunt of acknowledgement, as if the name meant less to him than it did to others. Jake sank into the seat across from him, still staring. "You were KIA, 1991. That's what they told us. Deep enemy territory. Everyone said—" He trailed off. Malcolm chuckled. Not cruelly, but with the tired amusement of someone who's heard too many lies for too many years. "That's what they wanted you to think." The words landed like a punch to the gut. Jake leaned back, trying to process what he was hearing. This wasn't just an old war hero sitting in a diner. This was a man who had been declared dead over 30 years ago. And yet here he was, alive, calm, drinking his coffee like nothing ever happened. "But how? Why?" Jake asked. "Why would they say you were dead?" Malcolm's smile faded. He looked out the window again, as if what he was about to say needed to pass through the rain first. The glass fogged slightly from the warmth inside. The booth, blurring the outside world into streaks of gray and light. Because it was easier than telling the truth. Jake waited. Malcolm finally turned back to him, his voice low and even. The mission wasn't what they told you. It was dirtier, messier. And when things went sideways, someone had to take the fall. A few of us made it out, but only if we agreed to disappear. Jake stared at him, stunned. So, they erased you? Malcolm nodded. They gave us a choice. Be ghosts, or be dead. The silence between them was thick, heavy with secrets, and the weight of decisions no one should have to make. The clinking of plates and idle chatter in the background felt distant now, like echoes from another world. Jake looked at Malcolm and didn't see a man defeated by time. He saw a man who had carried the weight of truth for decades and chose silence over safety. And for the first time in his life, Jake realized, sometimes the biggest heroes are the ones we never hear about. Malcolm leaned back in the booth, eyes distant, as if the rain tapping against the window was stirring memories he had long tried to bury. His voice lowered, becoming more reflective, almost haunted. We were never supposed to come back, he said, but I did. Barely. Jake sat. Still, hanging on every word, Malcolm went on to explain that Shadow Tide had gone off the rails. What began as a deep insertion recon op turned into something much darker. Orders were scrambled. Intel was wrong. And in the chaos that followed, Malcolm and a few others discovered something they weren't meant to see. Documents, faces, transactions, proof of betrayal at the highest level. Not just betrayal by enemies, but by their own. Corrupt officials. Hidden agendas. A mission that was never meant to be won, but rather to clean up a mess someone else had made. And when the truth risked surfacing, the easiest solution was silence. Permanent silence. I was captured, Malcolm said quietly. Held for weeks, tortured. But I never gave up the team, never gave up the intel. His hands trembled slightly as he wrapped them around the warm coffee mug, the only thing grounding him to the present. One night, I escaped. Crawled 20 miles through the jungle with 2 broken ribs and a bullet in my leg. I thought I was going home, until I saw the extraction team turn away. I wasn't on the list anymore. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. They left you? Malcolm nodded. I saw the look in the pilot's eyes. He knew who I was. He was ordered to leave. That's when Malcolm realized. He wasn't just forgotten. He was erased. And when he finally made contact with someone on the inside, they didn't send help. They sent a message, disappear, or die. For your safety, they said. For national security, they said. But Malcolm knew the truth. They were afraid of what I knew, he said. Afraid of what might happen if I talked. And so, he made the hardest decision of all. He vanished. New name, new life, new town. He traded his uniform for plaid shirts and his rifle for silence. The tattoo on his arm, the symbol of a sacrifice no one would ever understand, became the only reminder of who he used to be. I didn't want medals, Malcolm said, his voice soft but firm. I didn't want interviews. I didn't want revenge. He paused, looking Jake in the eyes. I just wanted peace, and for a long time, he had it. Until today, until Jake walked in. There was something in Jake's face, something Malcolm hadn't seen in years. Maybe it was the fire of youth, or the unshakable sense of duty. Or maybe it was that same glint he'd seen in the eyes of brothers who had fallen. Jake wasn't just curious. He was listening, truly listening. And that stirred something in Malcolm's soul. Maybe, just maybe, it was time. Not for himself, but for the others. The ones who never came back. The ones whose names aren't etched on walls. Whose families were. Told nothing. Only that they didn't make it. The ones who gave everything and got erased in return. Malcolm took a breath and said, "If I tell you what really happened, you need to promise me something." Jake leaned in, nodding. "Anything." Malcolm looked down at the tattoo, then back at Jake. "Don't let them be forgotten." Jake sat in silence for a long time after Malcolm stopped speaking, The diner was still buzzing with ordinary life. Waitresses refilling mugs, a couple chatting over pancakes, the jukebox humming faintly in the background. But everything felt different now. Time had slowed, the air charged with meaning. Malcolm shifted in his seat, reaching into his pocket to pull out a few crumpled bills for the check. Jake hesitated, then asked quietly, "Would it be okay if I took a photo with you?" Malcolm paused, eyes narrowing. Not in anger, but in caution. That old soldier instinct. He looked out the window one more time, maybe wondering if it was still safe to let the past touch the present. Then he nodded. "Only if you promise me one thing." Jake straightened up, attentive. "Don't tell them everything. Don't go chasing shadows. Just tell the truth," Malcolm said. "Tell them we were here. Tell them we mattered." Jake nodded solemnly. They stood together beside the booth, and a waitress offered to take the photo. Click. A single frame. Just two men, one old, one young, standing side by side in a quiet diner. No uniforms, no medals. But everything in that photo said, "Brothers in Arms." Jake left the diner with a lump in his throat and a mission in his heart. As he pushed open the door and stepped into the rainy street, he glanced back one last time. Through the window, he saw Malcolm sitting alone once again, hands around a half-empty coffee cup. But this time, Malcolm looked up, and with a faint smile, raised his hand in a small, deliberate salute. Jake returned it, standing still in the rain. That image, that single moment, would stay with him forever. A week later, Jake sat at his desk, staring at the photo. He typed out a post, not giving away any classified details, no mission codes or locations. Just the story of an unexpected meeting. The story of a man history had tried to erase, and the promise Jake had made. He hit post, and within hours, it exploded. The story went viral. Veterans from all across the country began reaching out. Some said they'd heard rumors of Malcolm Briggs. Others shared stories of unacknowledged missions, whispered legends, and faces that had disappeared. A few even claimed they'd fought beside him, or that someone they loved had. The comments flooded in. "My grandfather used to talk about a man named Briggs. We never knew what happened to my brother's unit. Now I wonder." Heroes like this should never be forgotten. Jake watched the response in awe. Not for himself, but for Malcolm. For the men who never came home. For the ones who were told to be quiet. For the ghosts. That rainy afternoon in a corner diner became more than just a story. It became a bridge between generations. One man with a legacy. One man just starting his own. And in that quiet exchange of respect, the torch was passed. Not in battle, but in memory. Because true heroes, they don't ask for recognition, they don't chase headlines, they don't need the world to know their names, but they deserve to be remembered. And sometimes, it only takes one person to make sure they are. Don't forget to subscribe my channel for more interesting videos.